Human design. Why should you bother? Well, in my opinion, it gives you a great vocabulary to describe certain types of energies that therefore lead to a certain type or types of behavior in people, and therefore you can get to know yourself better and others as well. The question is it just a pseudoscientific practice or is it a bit more complicated? Well, if you look at the first few lines of its Wikipedia page, they basically labeled it as a pseudoscientific practice, linking to a University of Stanford's article about pseudoscientific practices. And if you were to sum up that article, you would pretty much come up with something like a pseudoscientific practice is not scientific and is part of a doctrine whose proponents try to create the impression that it represents the most reliable knowledge on its subject matter. And while we could easily tick the first box, I'm not really sure about the second one, because there isn't really anyone telling me that it's the most reliable knowledge on that matter. And while there are some groups that are heavily invested in human design, there are definitely ways to learn about human design without becoming a member of that party or even without paying any money, at least to an extent that I am aware of. The problem with using a pseudoscientific label is that it has a derogatory meaning and cannot really be used in a value-neutral way. What do you think now? I'm not the one to dictate that. However, if we agree on not using any science label related to human design and instead label it as self-development, mythological, perhaps even psychotherapeutic practice, the problem dissolves. In spite of its mystical birth in 1987, when Robert Krakower, a Canadian journalist at the time, had a mystical experience on Ibiza that supposedly enlightened him to this knowledge, about which he wrote a book about 5 years later, there seem to be some deeper roots to that. In fact, it is based on Judaic Kabbalah, the I Ching, Chinese, the Vedic philosophy, astrology, and, be surprised now, modern physics as well. In my humble opinion, there is a reason that human design has stayed with me more than a year after my first original encounter with it, and I still look up some information from time to time. There's still what to learn. And so why should you bother about human design? For one, I think it gives you a great vocabulary to describe certain energies in people and in yourself that then allow you to also describe the behavior to which the energies lead to. And while you might say it just works like a placebo, I think it's way too accurate to be just a placebo, although it may be an element of that. So, are you ready to take a slight dive into what human design is about? So now that I've tried to do a quasi-science check, I wonder what this knowledge has to say about teachings such as human design. Now, to be honest, I haven't really found anything contradictory to the teachings of the Bible. However, we all know that even the best knowledge can be used by Satan to be twisted up and turned against its original meaning. So just be careful how you interpret human design and definitely do not take it as a rule book. Instead, just use it as a guide. So if you're still here, I will now take you through the most prominent distinction of human design, and that is energy types. And what that means is that human design pretty much says there are 5 different types of human beings on our planet. The most prominent type are generator types. And while I'm saying generator, there are actually 2 categories of generators, and those are generators that make about 36% and manifesting generators that make up for about 30%. Now, accounting for the other types, there are also manifestors, which are pretty rare, about 10%. There are projectors, around 23%. The one type that is the least frequently represented in society is the reflector type, which accounts for about 1% of society. And while I have zero idea on what metrics were used to determine these, it's what you can find from multiple sources describing human design. Now, what are the types for? Each type should behave a little differently, have a little bit different needs, and a little bit different perks to it. And so in order for society to work effectively, based on human design, we should all be following our type-specific strategy. So now that we have covered some basics about the origins of human design, we've also talked about how it's being perceived and even touched a little of its teachings. I wonder, would you be interested in going for a more in-depth human design journey with me? Let me know in case yes. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you in the comments. Till then, take good care of yourself and live your design in case you choose to do so. Noticed